Then the evaluation of multiple myeloma. So this multiple myeloma, uh, this is a continuation of a previous lecture. So this multiple myeloma, it is a part of the spectrum of plasma cell proliferative disorders. So this concept is restated on the NCCN guidelines. Okay, so what are these NCCN guidelines? National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines. According to the National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines, so this disease is divided into MGUS, smoldering myeloma or monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance, smoldering myeloma. So this is smoldering myeloma is asymptomatic, and if we take this multiple myeloma, so this is symptomatic. So disease is divided into MGUS, smoldering myeloma which is asymptomatic, and multiple myeloma symptomatic. So as treatment and management of each category are vastly different. So if we take this MGUS, asymptomatic myeloma, so the treatment as well as the management of each category are vastly different. So correct identification and diagnosis of multiple myeloma are of paramount importance. So when concern for multiple myeloma arises, so there are several approaches to screening and diagnosis. So according to the NCCN guidelines, it recommends the following diagnostic studies. So what are the diagnostic studies for multiple myeloma? So first we have to get a complete blood count with differential count, and then a platelet count. So a complete blood count, platelet count. Then you have to get a blood urea nitrogen, renal involvement, creatinine, electrolytes, albumin levels, calcium levels, hypercalcemia, serum LDH, beta 2 microglobulin. Apart from this, we also have to get a serum immunoglobulins. Okay, in multiple myeloma, IgG it is more common. In Waldenström's microglobulinemia, IgM is the most predominant immunoglobulin. So serum immunoglobulins, then we have to get a serum protein electrophoresis, and serum immunofixation electrophoresis. Then we have to get a 24-hour urine proteinuria, then urine protein electrophoresis and urine immunofixation electrophoresis. We have to get a immunoglobulins, protein electrophoresis, then we have an immunofixation electrophoresis. So this is from the serum. Then we have 24-hour urine proteinuria, urine protein electrophoresis. Okay, so this maybe we can discuss about the electrophoresis later. Urine immunofixation electrophoresis, and then we have a serum free light chain assay. Okay, serum free light chain assay, and whole body low dose CT or PET CT scan, and then bone marrow aspirate and biopsy, including immunohistochemistry or flow cytometry, and then also cytogenetics. And then we have this fluorescent in situ hybridization, plasma cell fish. Okay, so in this where it detects the chromosomal abnormalities. So here deletion 13, deletion 17p13, T414, T1114, T1416, 1q21 amplification, and 1p abnormality. So for any chromosomal abnormalities, we have to get a plasma cell fish. So here it is deletion 13, deletion 17p13, T414, T1114, 1416, and 1q21 amplification, and 1p abnormality. So historically, we have diagnosed multiple myeloma if clonal bone marrow plasma cells were greater than or equal than 10% on bone marrow biopsy. So when do we diagnose multiple myeloma? So to diagnose multiple myeloma, so if we do a bone marrow, so if clonal bone marrow plasma cells were greater than or equal to 10%, so we are doing a bone marrow biopsy and we are seeing if the bone marrow plasma cells are greater than or equal to 10%. in addition to at least one of the following CRAB criteria, or if a biopsy proven plasmacytoma was present. Okay. So along with that, we should also have one of the following CRAB criteria. Okay. So here we should have a calcium level. So this calcium level should be greater than 1 mg per deciliter than the upper limit of normal, or greater than 11 milligrams per deciliter. 1 m. Okay, so serum calcium level greater than 1 mg per deciliter higher than the upper limit of normal, or serum calcium greater than 11 milligrams per deciliter. Renal insufficiency. When creatinine, if it is greater than 2 milligrams per deciliter, renal insufficiency, creatinine greater than 2 milligram per deciliter, or creatinine clearance less than 40 ml per minute. So this is the CRAB criteria. CRAB criteria means calcium, renal involvement, anemia, and lytic lesions on the bone. So anemia, it is less than 10 gram per deciliter, or HP greater than 2 gram per deciliter below the lower limit of normal, or one or more osteolytic bone lesions, one or more osteolytic bone lesions on skeletal radiography or a plain radiography or a CT or PET scan, often described as punched out round radiolucent lesions. So how will be the lesions? Punched out round radiolucent lesions. So while this set of CRAB criteria identified the majority of cases requiring treatment, but many were missed. So according to this CRAB criteria, majority of cases were identified, but many were missed. So because of this, what has happened is, in November 2014, the International Myeloma Working Group, they identified other factors. Apart from this CRAB criteria, they have also identified other factors. So associated with an 80% higher risk of developing myeloma related organ damage within 2 years. So this myeloma working group, so they also have identified other factors which are associated with 80% higher risk of developing myeloma related organ damage within 2 years. So as a result, what has happened is, few other criteria were added to this CRAB criteria as diagnostic alternatives to myeloma defining events. Okay, so in this, what is the other criteria? Bone marrow plasma cells equal to 60%. So if you do a bone marrow aspiration and biopsy, bone marrow plasma cells equal to 60%. Involved by uninvolved serum free light chain ratio greater than or equal to 100. So what happens? Free light chains will be increased. Involved by uninvolved serum free light chain ratio greater than or equal to 100. And abnormal MRI with more than one focal lesion. So MRI showing more than one focal lesion, each lesion greater than 5 mm, that were often missed on previous skeletal surveys. Abnormal MRI with more than one focal lesion, each lesion greater than 5 mm, that were often missed on previous skeletal surveys. So now the presence of any CRAB criteria or any of these three additional criteria justifies the diagnosis and therapy. So what is this? So this new set of diagnostic criteria, so this is referred to as SLIM CRAB criteria. So in this, you can see the free light chain ratio. We can see the plasma cells and also on the MRI, bone marrow plasma cells along with MRI. So this, it is more sensitive. So this criteria is certainly more sensitive and identifies more of the cases needing treatment. So it is certainly more sensitive and it identifies more of the cases needing treatment. So what is the treatment and management of multiple myeloma? So initial management of multiple myeloma should involve evaluation for any acute issues. So first, any acute issues, so these acute issues, it must be stabilized immediately. So what are the acute issues? So we have to give isotonic saline for volume expansion, calcitonin and or bisphosphonates to address severe hypercalcemia. So if there is any severe hypercalcemia, instead of directly going for the treatment with chemotherapy agents, what has to be done is this hypercalcemia has to be addressed first, like giving isotonic saline for volume expansion, calcitonin and bisphosphonates to address severe hypercalcemia. So if there is any renal dysfunction, if it is noted, what should be done? Nephrology consultation along with fluids have to be given, nephrotoxic agents have to be avoided, and if any medicines, if they require renal dosage adjustments, so that also has to be done. And if renal failure is very severe, so hemodialysis has to be done. Okay, if there is any renal dysfunction, take a nephrology consultation, address the fluid status, avoid any nephrotoxic agents, adjust the renal dose medicines, and if the renal dysfunction is severe, so discussion of hemodialysis. And spinal cord compression resulting from vertebral fracture or plasmacytoma can also be seen, and it is a medical emergency. So if there is any spinal cord compression, okay, so why the spinal cord compression? Osteolytic lesions leading to vertebral fractures, or if there is a plasmacytoma which is compressing, so this is a medical emergency. So this should be managed by a neurosurgery or a orthopedic consultation. And if hyperviscosity is diagnosed, so then what has to be done? Plasmapheresis should be done. If hyperviscosity, plasmapheresis should be completed. So once stabilized, so the patient's treatment plan is driven by risk stratification and transplant eligibility. So we have stabilized the patient. So then what has to be done? Risk has to be stratified, and we have to assess if patient is eligible for any transplantation. So how do you classify the risk stratification? So this definitely falls into one of two categories, whether it is a high risk category or whether it is a standard risk multiple myeloma patient. So high risk multiple myeloma patient, so this is defined as if any of the following, if it is seen on the fish, if we do a fluorescent in situ hybridization, if any of these translocations like 14, so you have to remember mostly it is 14, okay, Valentine's Day, February 14, so 14, 16, okay. So translocation 14 plus 2, 14, 16, then 14 plus 6, okay, 14, 20, right, 14, 16, 14, 20, and deletion 17p13, deletion 17p13, then here 14 has come here, okay, 4, 14 or 1q gain, okay, 14, 16. So these are the high risk chromosomal abnormalities. 14, 16, 14 plus 2, 14 plus 6, deletion 17p13, okay, T4, 14 or 1q gain. Standard risk will demonstrate either trisomies or T11, 14 or 6, 14. 14 has come this side, okay. So here standard risk, no. So in standard risk it will demonstrate either trisomies T11, 14 or 6, 14. So this is about the high risk or standard risk according to the fish translocations. Then transplant eligibility. So this transplant eligibility, so this is made on a case by case basis. Transplant eligibility, it is made on a case by case basis. So typically patients who are over 77 years old, age greater than 77 years, patient having cirrhosis, liver, okay, patient having cirrhosis, and Eastern Cooperative Oncology Group performance status. Okay, 3 or 4 patients were greater than 77 years old, patients were having cirrhosis, and patients were having a Eastern Cooperative Oncology Group performance status of 3 or 4, or who are having this New York Heart Association class 3 or 4 heart failure. So these patients are transplant ineligible. So who are the patients who are transplant ineligible? Greater than 77 years, patient having cirrhosis, patient having ECOG performance status of 3 or 4, or NYHA class 3 or 4 heart failure. So these patients are transplant ineligible. So patients who are fit for transplant, so now we think that this patient is fit for transplant. So those patients who are fit for transplant, they should receive a induction therapy over 3 or 4 months to decrease the tumor burden. So we have selected one patient. So this patient is fit for transplant. No, I will do the transplant for this patient. So this patient, he has to receive a induction therapy over 3 or 4 months. Why this induction therapy? To decrease the tumor burden. So after this, after tumor burden is decreased, so this will be followed by a peripheral blood stem cell mobilization. So from periphery, blood stem cells are collected and harvested, and then a autologous stem cell transplant will be done. So this improves the overall and progression free survival. Okay, first chemotherapy we give, tumor burden is decreased, then stem cells are harvested, and then autologous stem cell transplant is done, which improves the overall and progression free survival. The autologous stem cell transplant can be performed early after recovery from a stem cell collection or delayed at the time of first relapse. So when can this transplantation be done? So immediately after recovery from stem cell collection, or it can also be delayed. We can collect the stem cells and we can delay this transplant till the first relapse. After completing autologous stem cell transplantation, the patient will be placed back. So once transplant is done, what will happen? The patient will be placed back on a maintenance therapy. Transplantation is done, then patient will be placed back on a maintenance therapy until disease progression or based on tolerability. So patient will be, after transplantation, patient will be on maintenance therapy until the disease progresses, or based on tolerability we can continue the maintenance therapy. So what are the ideal induction regimens? So what are the induction regimens which are used to decrease the tumor burden? So in general, based on the Mayo stratification for myeloma and risk adapted therapy, M-SMART consensus opinion, okay, according to the M-SMART, Mayo stratification for myeloma and risk adapted therapy, for patients who are deemed high risk disease and transplant eligible. See, I have selected one transplant eligible patient, but this transplant eligible patient is a high risk patient, okay. So they should be started with a transplant eligible patient, and again he is a high risk patient. So this transplant eligible high risk patient, induction therapy would typically be daratumumab, bortezomib, lenalidomide and dexamethasone. So this will be followed by a early autologous stem cell transplant. Transplant eligible patient, high risk patient, we are giving daratumumab, bortezomib, lenalidomide and dexamethasone. So it will be followed by early autologous stem cell transplant. Although debatable, long-term survival seems to favor an early transplant approach in high-risk disease. So in high-risk disease, early transplant approach is favorable. After completion of this transplant, patient should be initiated on a proteasome inhibitor-based maintenance therapy. It should be initiated and continued until the disease progresses. So high risk transplant eligible high risk patient daratumumab, bortezomib, lenalidomide and dexamethasone followed by early autologous stem cell transplant and later with the maintenance therapy. So in those patients with a standard risk who are transplant eligible, a similar algorithm is followed but with a different drug regimen. So what is the drug regimen? 4 cycles of bortezomib. Here also 4 cycles. Okay. Here bortezomib, lenalidomide and dexamethasone. Instead of BAD, okay, it is BLD, lenalidomide. Okay. 4 cycles of bortezomib, lenalidomide and dexamethasone. So this is completed. So this is followed by autologous stem cell transplant and again autologous stem cell transplant and then a maintenance therapy with lenalidomide until disease progression or tolerability permits. So if patient is transplant ineligible, okay, so transplant ineligible patients, there are several options. Okay, one approach would be to employ the VRD, okay, so that is dexamethasone, bortezomib and lenalidomide regimen for 8 to 12 cycles followed by a maintenance bortezomib based therapy. Or another option could include, instead of this bortezomib, daratumumab, lenalidomide, dexamethasone continued until disease progression based on the MAIA trial. So this will improve the progression-free survival and overall survival compared to lenalidomide and dexamethasone. So if transplant ineligible, 3 drugs are used. Either it could be a bortezomib based therapy or it could be a daratumumab based therapy instead of using only 2 drugs like lenalidomide and dexamethasone. For standard risk transplant ineligible patients, so this is for high risk transplant ineligible. Standard risk transplant ineligible patients, options include VRD for 8 to 12 cycles followed by lenalidomide maintenance or same continued daratumumab, lenalidomide and dexamethasone continued until disease progression. Then we have the differential diagnosis. So 4 drugs are important. So what are those drugs? Daratumumab, bortezomib, lenalidomide and dexamethasone. So then we have the differential diagnosis for many of the vague symptoms accompanying multiple myeloma is broad. However, several entities must be ruled out. So if we take this MGUS, monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance, see here plasma cell proliferation will be there, but it will be less than 10% and monoclonal protein also less than 3 gram per deciliter. So because of this less proliferation, there is no end organ damage. If we come to this smoldering multiple myeloma, see plasma cells are ranging between 10 to 59%. Monoclonal protein, it is greater than or equal to 3 gram per deciliter, but no end organ damage. Here in smoldering multiple myeloma, no end organ damage, but in multiple myeloma, end organ damage will be there. Okay. Solitary plasmacytoma. So this solitary means solitary lesion which will be made up of clonal plasma cells. Bone marrow will be normal, negative imaging outside of the only single lesion, tissue lesion will be there. So which will be made up of clonal plasma cells. That is, if we do a biopsy of that tissue, it will show the plasma cells. And then we have this Waldenström macroglobulinemia. So in this Waldenström macroglobulinemia, lymphoplasmacytic lymphoma noted in the bone marrow. So in Waldenström's macroglobulinemia, lymphoplasmacytic lymphoma. So this is noted in the bone marrow, and M protein is typically IgM. So in multiple myeloma it is IgG, and less common is IgA. Okay, first IgG, then second is IgA. But here in Waldenström macroglobulinemia, IgM, which is very unusual in multiple myeloma, and presence of MYD 88665P, and also the presence of MYD88 L265P, and symptoms include hyperviscosity. What are the symptoms in Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia? The symptoms in Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia include hyperviscosity, peripheral neuropathy, anemia, lymphadenopathy, and hepatosplenomegaly. So what will be the symptoms in Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia? Hyperviscosity, peripheral neuropathy, anemia, lymphadenopathy, and hepatosplenomegaly. Then we have this AL amyloidosis. So this AL amyloidosis, so this is caused by deposition of the amyloid fibrils or non-fibrillar material. AL amyloidosis, amyloid fibrils or non-fibrillar material. So because of this deposition of amyloid fibrils, what will happen? So this will result in heart failure, or there will be enlargement of the liver, hepatomegaly, and or nephrotic syndrome, because these are also deposited in the kidney, causing nephrotic syndrome. So here what will happen? Less than 20% plasma cells in the bone marrow, but here there won't be any lytic lesions, and plasma cells also in the bone marrow will be less than 20%. And if we do a Congo red staining, it will be positive for amyloid, will be positive for Congo red staining on bone marrow or affected tissue. Then we have staging of multiple myeloma. So there are several staging systems for multiple myeloma. So the two main systems are used. One is Jury-Salmon staging and the other is revised international staging system. So several staging systems, but the most common is Jury-Salmon staging and revised international staging system. So for many years, Jury-Salmon staging system was the standard for risk stratification. So it was on tumor cell mass, hemoglobin, calcium, IgA, IgG levels, urine monoclonal protein levels, and extent of bone marrow X-rays. But there is some subjectivity, accuracy, and reproducibility are different. So with this in mind, we have this revised international staging system, okay, RISS. So in this what we have is, we have divided into stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. In stage 1 means, stage 2 means, so what is stage 1? First of all, what is stage 1? So if we do a beta 2 microglobulin, it will be less than 3.5. Albumin will be greater than or equal to 3.5. LDH will be normal and standard cytogenetics. So stage 2 means neither stage 1 nor stage 3, stage 2. So what happens in stage 3? Beta 2 microglobulin will be higher and albumin and high risk cytogenetics will be there here, okay. Albumin will be less here, and along with that cytogenetics will be high risk, okay. High risk means deletion 17p, 414, 1416, okay, and elevated LDH. So all these are high risk staging factors in revised international staging system. And prognosis. So what is the prognosis for multiple myeloma? So this is quite variable and many factors affect the outcomes. The two main drivers in prognosis would be the stage and the disease biology. So what are the two main drivers in prognosis? The two drivers in prognosis would be the stage and the disease biology. So the RISS staging was developed when evaluating newly diagnosed multiple myeloma. So this revised international staging system, stage 1 overall survival was 82%, 5-year overall survival is 82% and progression free survival was 52%. If we go to stage 3, no, the 5-year overall survival, it has decreased to 40%, that is almost half, and progression free survival 24%, okay. So the compared to stage 1, so stage 2, so the survival has decreased. So high risk abnormalities. So high risk cytogenetics are important. 4, 14, 14, 16, 14, 20 are all high risk. And complications. So what are the common complications with multiple myeloma? So hypercalcemia, renal insufficiency, infection, skeletal lesions and anemia. And so apart from this CRAB criteria, so you are already familiar with the CRAB criteria, then we have also the other common complications. So these other common complications include venous thromboembolism and the hyperviscosity syndrome. So the less common complications include venous thromboembolism and hyperviscosity syndrome. So if we take this hypercalcemia, so why this hypercalcemia? So this is because of the bone demineralization. So what are the symptoms? So this hypercalcemia, it could be asymptomatic, or this hypercalcemia can cause anorexia, fatigue, constipation, polydipsia, polyuria, confusion or stupor. So what will be the symptoms when a patient has got hypercalcemia? So when a patient has got hypercalcemia, patient will have anorexia, fatigue, constipation, polydipsia, polyuria, confusion and stupor. So what are the treatment options for hypercalcemia? So this treatment depends on the clinical severity and the rapidity of installation of hypercalcemia. So for hypercalcemia, what we have to give, adequate hydration has to be done, glucocorticoids, bisphosphonates, calcitonin and or hemodialysis has to be done. Glucocorticoids, bisphosphonates, they cause hypocalcemia, and calcitonin. So these are used for the treatment of hypercalcemia. And when we come to the development of renal insufficiency, so this can be acute renal insufficiency or chronic. So what is the cause of renal insufficiency? So many etiological mechanisms are involved. One is excess production of the monoclonal light chains, that is light chain cast nephropathy, or so why this renal failure in multiple myeloma? Plasma cells proliferating, excess light chains are produced. So all these monoclonal light chains are deposited, or deposition of the intact light chains. So because of this, what is happening? Nephrotic syndrome, light chain amyloidosis, hypercalcemia, hyperuricemia or dehydration. So because of this intact light chains, what is happening? Nephrotic syndrome, light chain amyloidosis, hypercalcemia, hyperuricemia or dehydration. So myeloma bone disease. Why this bone disease in myeloma? Because of the overexpression of RANKL by bone marrow stroma. Bone is there, bone marrow is there. So the bone marrow stroma, it will produce RANKL. Okay. So what is this RANKL? Overexpression of this RANKL, no? So this RANKL, what will it activate? It will activate the osteoclast. So because of this RANKL, so this RANKL which is produced by the bone marrow stroma, it activates osteoclast. Because of this, the bone is resorbed. So bone breakdown, so this will lead to calcium. Bone is breaking down. So what is released? Calcium is released into the blood. So this calcium release into the blood causes hypercalcemia and symptoms of kidney failure. So because of this, the kidney failure can develop acutely or chronically. And because of this bone disease, it will manifest as severe bone pain, pathological fractures, and sometimes even spinal cord compression also occurs. So what are the features of this bone disease because of the overexpression of RANKL? So it manifests as severe bone pain, pathological fractures, and even spinal cord compression. And another important complication that can occur is an increased risk of infection. So what is the another important complication which can occur? So infection. So the infection risk seems to be highest over the first 3 to 4 months of induction therapy. So what is the another important complication? The another important complication is infection. So when we give this induction therapy to reduce the tumor burden, so the infection risk seems to be highest over the first 3 to 4 months. So what are the factors contributing to increased risk of infection? Why this infection is occurring? Because of the impaired lymphocyte function, suppression of the normal plasma cell function. Okay, lymphocyte function is impaired, normal plasma cell function is suppressed, hypogammaglobulinemia, and chemotherapy induced neutropenia. So what are the most common infections? So the infections are pneumonia and urinary tract infections. The most common, what are the most common infections in multiple myeloma? So most commonly pneumonia and urinary tract infections. And what are the organisms which most commonly causes infection. So these are Streptococcus pneumonia, Haemophilus influenza, and Escherichia coli. So what are the organisms? Streptococcus pneumonia, Haemophilus influenza, and Escherichia coli. So early identification is important to assure timely treatment and infection resolution. So what we have to do? We have to identify early for timely treatment and infection resolution. And then we also have the neuropathy. So this neuropathy, it is also commonly seen in multiple myeloma patient. Why neuropathy? It is due to plasma cell dyscrasia itself, direct compression or light chain deposition. Plasma cell dyscrasia itself, or direct compression by plasmacytoma, or even the light chain deposition itself causes neuropathy. See, even the drugs which are used in the treatment of this multiple myeloma, like thalidomide, bortezomib, or vincristine, okay, thalidomide, bortezomib, or vincristine, so they also cause this neuropathy. And also significant is the increased risk for thrombosis. So there is also increased risk of thrombosis. So why this thrombosis? Patient comorbidities, tumor disease related factors, and immunomodulatory drugs include thalidomide or lenalidomide. So this thalidomide and lenalidomide, so they also cause this thrombosis. And a rare side effect is hyperviscosity, which can have severe complications because of the plasma cell excess proliferation. There will be hyperviscosity. So this will present as oronasal bleeding, blurred vision, retinal hemorrhage, seizure, or other neurological symptoms, confusion, dyspnea, and heart failure. So what are the symptoms associated with this hyperviscosity? Either it could be a oronasal bleeding, blurred vision, retinal hemorrhage, seizures, or other confusion, dyspnea, and heart failure. So this is considered an emergency, and plasmapheresis should be initiated immediately to promptly relieve the symptoms. So to relieve the symptoms of this hyperviscosity, like oronasal bleeding, blurred vision, retinal hemorrhage, seizures, or other, what should be done? Plasmapheresis should be initiated immediately to relieve the symptoms. So that's all about multiple myeloma, and thank you.